We are back. It's story time with Uncle Scotty. We are back. It's story time with Uncle. Hey! It is story time with Uncle Scotty. Did you know that? I knew that. Did you know that? Did you? I knew that. Hello, I'm Uncle Scotty, your host for Storytime with Uncle Scotty. We have our own mugs. Water is delicious. Hydration is important. Also important. Washing our hands, washing our hands, washing our hands, washing our hands. Even as we can go more places in the world, we still must wash our hands, wash our hands, wash our hands. Now, thank you to everyone who's been checking us out on various places, liking us, subscribing to us, sharing this with other people. It means so much. I like Storytime with just you and I, but if you can think of someone else who might like it too, you should tell them about it. Okay, we have been reading Mr. Popper's Penguins. Mr. Popper and his penguins. Wow, what a journey they have been on. Literal and figurative. They've been on a life journey internally, learning lots of things, seeing a lot of things in the world, but also of literal journey, going from Stillwater, which I don't know where that is, but they went to the Pacific and traveled all the way from Seattle to New York, which they are approaching now. Now, Mr. Popper last said that the penguins are getting irritable. They're getting a little frustrating, a little testy. Let's see what that means. Chapter 18, April winds. Winds, 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 winds. If it was unseasonably warm in Boston, it was actually hot in New York. In their rooms at the Great Tower Hotel overlooking Central Park, the penguins were feeling the heat badly. Mr. Popper took them up to the roof garden to catch whatever cool breeze might be blowing. The penguins were all charmed by the sparkling lights and the confusion of the city below. The younger birds began crowding over to the edge of the roof and looking down at the great canyons beneath them. It made Mr. Popper very nervous to see them shoving each other, as if any moment they might succeed in pushing one over. He remembered how the South Pole penguins always did this to find out what danger lay below. Now, if you remember early in the book, early in the story, we learned that the way that South Pole penguins find fish is they'll all crowd around a hole in the ice, and they'll push one in to see if there's a fish or a predator there. And if that penguin survives, then they'll all go in and get fish, I think. If it doesn't survive, then they go away until it maybe is safe again. So he's concerned that they're doing this from a rooftop in New York City. Now, where else have we heard about a rooftop in New York City? Maybe some of you remember James and the Giant Peach. The peach landed technically on a rooftop in New York City, very high up. Also, a bunch of creatures who seem to have human-like aspects to them, even though they're just animals. Wow. Okay. The roof was not a safe place for them. Mr. Popper had never forgotten how badly frightened he had been when Captain Cook had been so ill before Greta came. He could not risk the chance of losing one of his penguins now. Where the penguins were concerned, nothing was ever too much trouble for him. He took them downstairs again and bathed them under the cold showers in the bathroom. This kept him busy a large part of the night. So the penguins are too hot. They can't be outside because they're dangerous. They're playing too close to the edge. So Mr. Popper's going and giving them all, 12 penguins, a cold bath to cool them off. With all this lack of sleep, Mr. Popper was quite drowsy the next morning, and when he had to call the taxis to get to the theater. Besides, Mr. Popper had always been a little absent-minded. That is how he made the great mistake when he said to the first taxi driver, "Regal Theater." "Yes, sir," said the driver, threading his way in and out of traffic on Broadway, which greatly interested the children and the penguins. Now, Broadway, big street that goes down the middle of Manhattan, the middle of New York City. Broadway, you've probably heard of it. Broadway is important because there's lots of theaters there, lots of shows on Broadway, big musicals and big plays, the biggest in the world on Broadway. They had almost reached the theater when the driver suddenly turned. "Say," he said, "you don't mean to say those penguins are going to be on the same bill with Swenson seals, do you?" "I don't know what else is on the bill," said Mr. Popper, paying him. "Anyway, here's the Regal." And they piled out and filed in the stage entrance. In the wings stood a large, burly-faced, In the wings stood a large, burly, red-faced man. I don't know if he's mad, but should have made my face red. "So these are the popper-performing penguins, huh?" he said. "Well, what I want to tell you, Mr. Popper, is that I'm Swenson, and those are my seals in there on the stage right now. And if your birds try any funny business, it'll be too bad for them. My seals are tough, see? They'd think nothing of eating 2 or 3 penguins apiece." From the stage could be heard the hoarse barks. I don't know if that's right. Okay, horse barks. I just realized. Horse, like I have a sore throat. Horse throat, not a horse. Not a horse that you ride. Okay, good. From the stage could be heard the hoarse barks of the seals who were going through their act. "Papa," said Mrs. Popper, "the penguins are the last act on the bill. You go run back quick and get those taxis, and we'll let the penguins ride around for a while until it's their number." Mr. Popper hurried out to catch the drivers. When he returned, it was too late. The popper-performing penguins had already discovered the Swenson seals. Dun, dun, dun! "Papa, I can't look!" cried the children. There was the sound of dreadful confusion on the stage. The audience was in an uproar, and the curtain quickly run down. When the poppers rushed onto the stage, both the penguins and the seals had found the stairway leading to the Swenson dressing room and were on their way upstairs. I can't bear to think what's happening up there," said Mr. Popper with a shudder. Mr. Swenson only laughed. "I hope your birds were insured, Popper," he said. "How much were they worth?" "Well, let's go up and look." "You go up, Papa," said Mrs. Popper. "Bill, you run out of the theater and call the police to come and try to save some of our penguins." "I will get the fire department," said Janie. When the firemen, with a great clanging, clang, 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 came and set up their ladders so that they could get in through the window of Mr. Swenson's dressing room, they were a little vexed. It's like confused, like, I'm vexed. They were a little vexed to find that there was no fire at all. However, when they found 6 black mustached seals sitting barking in the middle of the room, with 12 penguins parading gaily, happily, around them in a square, they felt better. Then the policemen came in their patrol and climbed up the ladder which the firemen had left against the building. By the time they too came through the window, they could scarcely believe their eyes, for the firemen had put firemen's helmets on the penguins, which made the delighted birds look very silly and girlish. That's okay, it's fun. Because putting a fire hat on makes you look silly, suppose. Seeing the firemen so friendly with the penguins, the policemen naturally took sides with the seals and put policemen's caps on them. The seals looked very fierce with their long black mustaches and black faces underneath. The penguins under their firemen's helmets were parading in front of the policemen, while the seals in their policeman caps were barking at the firemen when Mr. Popper and Mr. Swenson finally opened the door. And here we can see, it's a good photo. We have a Popper penguin in a fireman hat, fireperson hat, and a Swenson seal and a police person's cap. Mr. Popper sat down. His relief was so great that for a moment he could not speak. "You policemen better get your hats off my seals now," said Mr. Swenson. "I got to go down on the stage and finish the act now." Then he and his 6 seals slipped out of the room with a few parting barks. "Well, goodbye, ducks," said the firemen, regretfully removing their helmets from the penguins and putting them on their own heads. Then they disappeared down the ladder. The penguins, of course, wanted to follow, but Mr. Popper held them back. Just then the door flew open and the theater manager burst into the room. "Hold that man!" he shouted to the policeman, pointing at Mr. Popper. "I have a warrant for his arrest." "Who, me?" said Mr. Popper in a daze. "What have I done?" "You've broken into my theater and thrown the place into a panic. That's what you've done. You're a disturber of the peace." "But I'm Mr. Popper, and these are my performing penguins, famous from coast to coast." "I don't care who you are. You haven't any business in this theater." "But Mr. Greenbaum is going to pay us $5,000 for a week at the Regal." "Mr. Greenbaum's theater is the Royal, not the Regal. You've come to the wrong theater. Anyway, out you go, you and your performing penguins. The patrol is waiting outside." Okay. And we'll find out what happens next time on Storytime with Uncle Scotty. I've been your host, Uncle Scotty. Thank you for listening, watching, liking, checking, seeing, parroting, sharing. Hello, goodbye. Thank you for sharing your time with us. And I'll see you next time. Bye.